blockchain? How does it work? Where is it used? How is it used? These are some of the questions I think we'll try to answer through this presentation. But I want to focus more on just making you aware of how it works, so that you will get confidence about this very often repeated statement that blockchains are quite safe, secure, and untamperable. These are some characteristics of blockchain which are being highlighted in every discussion on blockchain. And what makes them so is one of the areas that I will be focusing on. Of course, things like where are they used, how are they used, and there are some terminologies again, some smaller concepts associated with blockchain, which I think you will be hearing in the days ahead. It's quite likely that some of the companies in which you will be working are quite, it's even possible that in the next 3 to 5 years, almost every company will have something to do with blockchains. That is my opinion. Okay, so let's just quickly look at the history of blockchain. Actually, many people start by saying that it is all the work of a person or a group of persons. In fact, they operate, or that person operates under a pseudonym called Nakamoto. Satoshi Nakamoto is the name that was associated with a paper which was published in 2008. Okay, and there Satoshi, or whoever that group is, or that it's very funny to note that this is one of the technologies which is gaining in popularity, but the inventor of this technology, or the person who put it to first use, is not coming forward. Okay, but there are reasons related to this, and we'll get into this in on Friday, because it all started with Bitcoin. Okay, but this paper of 2009 mentioned clearly that we could have a decentralized peer-to-peer file, which they call ledger, in which transactions could be stored, and with proper software support in different areas, this can be made safe, secure, auditable, and tamper-proof. Okay, the idea of having a decentralized ledger was actually first propounded in 1990. There are people who talked about a decentralized ledger, but it was not until 2008 that actually somebody wrote a application which could manage this ledger. For most of us, for the sake of simplicity, you may consider this ledger to be just like a database. So you have your contacts, right? The contacts are stored in a database, right? Similarly, in fact, tomorrow the contacts may be stored even on a blockchain, which is quite possible. Okay, so from the analogy point of view, a blockchain is like a database. The only difference is that databases are vulnerable to hacking. Okay, and there are technical reasons, we won't get into that, but blockchains have certain features built in, which make sure, or rather where the probability that it will be hacked is very, very low. But I must add that in the early days, blockchain was getting hacked, and we'll see that again when we are talking about Bitcoin, because that's the exciting area which you should actually look at the history. Here, the history is very straightforward. The concept was first propounded in 1990. The paper indicating its use for cryptocurrency actually came in 2008, where he actually mentioned the word Bitcoin and said Bitcoin with a peer-to-peer network. Okay, and when you read the paper, it is actually talking of the concept of blockchain. Then in 2011, 12, actually, the deployment of cryptocurrency began. And actually, you could do commercial transactions. I think there was in the 2011 a person by the name of Laszlo. He actually bought a pizza worth $25. And that time you will laugh when you hear that probably he spent something like 10,000 bitcoins just to buy a pizza. But at that time, getting bitcoins was not so difficult. They were not they had not caught the attention of media, and only people in the cyber world, right, understood bitcoins and were dabbling in bitcoins. And bitcoins like used to be sharing of some kind of gifts between friends and things like that. But in 2011 there was a commercial transaction, and this person named Laszlo could buy a pizza using bitcoin. So that is where the cryptocurrency actually came into picture. And slowly the understanding of blockchain, which was the underlying technology for Bitcoin, was understood by more and more people. And in 2013-14 onwards, even the financial markets started working on blockchain application. And afterwards, you can see where all these blockchains are already in use today. Okay, blockchains are already in use, except for cryptocurrency, for the simple reason that cryptocurrency is something which at the moment is it was designed to be out of control of the government. In fact, no government or no central agency controls the flow of bitcoins, except the people who mine and do certain type of work on blockchain. They earn bitcoins, okay, and after that they come into the market, and then they can be purchased by paying your normal currency, which is known as fiat currency, okay, or your printed notes and coins, okay. So but blockchain had a lot of other uses which people began to realize from 2013 onwards. Financial markets started taking attention in this. Banks and bank consortium, that means a group of banks also started looking at it. In fact, some of the banks are already using it, and we'll see a list of users of blockchain. Or as I mentioned, they have not much to do with cryptocurrency. That's the only difference. But blockchains have a lot of applications, and a lot of companies are already using it. In 1516, we come to permission blockchain. We'll soon be just understanding what is the difference between a permission blockchain and a permissionless. But let me just clear it here itself. A blockchain that is open for access by any person in the public domain is a permissionless blockchain. You don't need anything except have an application that can access the blockchain, okay, and anybody could access the blockchain and read the data in the blockchain. This kind of system is still there in Bitcoin, okay. But all commercial applications using blockchain technology slowly migrated to permissioned blockchains. That means permission access system, which in other words was nothing but you need to have authorization, and it could be as simple as having a username and password in an application. So a blockchain is there on the internet with certain machines, and we'll come to that too. But users need to have an application. Users can also be one of those users who have a copy of the blockchain. We'll come back to that. But the point is, you need an application, and in this application, the simplest way for access control is your username and password. This kind of system started sometime in 2015 or 2016, and of late it is gaining popularity in the uh, startups where they use ICOs to collect funds. We'll see some example of that and the implications of ICOs also. ICOs are just analogous to IPOs. That's an exciting area once again. Of course, you see in the bottom also some more things like in 14-15 you have smart contracts, and in 16-17 there was a consolidation of further applications of blockchain. So this is the kind of history you can say. If you say that the first commercial application using a blockchain started in 2008 or 9, now we are just about 13 years old, no, 2021. So comparing it with 2008, it's just 13 years old, and this technology is developing rapidly. So let's see what is a blockchain. As I already said, the simplest analogy is your database, or simply one file in which records are stored. Okay. So blockchain was originally introduced by with Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. It's a distributed ledger. Now, the word distributed ledger means the entire copy of this file, which they call ledger, right, is available to all members who have access to the blockchain. That is what is meant by a distributed ledger, right? And it comprises of interlocked blocks, and that is why the name blockchain. It is built slowly over time, and the blocks are chronologically arranged. You know, whatever happens today, it cannot be put in any place in the ledger earlier than today's date, including time. Every block has a date and time stamp. Okay, and that is one of the ways in which it gets interlocked. You can't move one block to any other position. Okay, and there's a lot of technical things that happen from the start of creating a block till the block gets added to the ledger. Okay, and so here the definition says that it is just a distributed ledger that comprises of interlocked blocks that carry immutable information, where participants maintain a replica of the shared ledger. Okay, originally in the early days, maybe 2008 to 2011, 12, where when you started with permissioned blockchains, then this distribution of the ledger, they wanted to control it. They didn't want every user to have a copy of the ledger, so they made some modifications. But by and large, a large number of computers worldwide would be having a copy of this ledger, and that itself makes it extremely difficult to try to fudge any figures, tamper with any information, or even hack into one of the ledgers. Even if you hack into one of the ledgers and you make any change, that set of blocks will actually become useless, because there is a constant way of checking. Every time a block gets added, the entire ledger gets checked, for what do you call, uh, uh, what is called, that it is not tampered. It gets checked for whether it's like validated. Okay, whatever was the situation before this block was added, and whatever is the situation, or when the last block was added, whatever was the situation, is it still the same today? That is checked first, and then only a new block is added. That is also one of the reasons we say that it is immutable information. Immutable, if you just for making it easy to understand, look at the last line there. Immutable means not changing. This one, immutable means not changing over time, and an immutable object is an object whose state cannot be modified after it is created, and blocks are belonging to that category. Okay, blockchain facilitates the process of recording transactions of different types. Okay, Bitcoin is just one of the transactions that it records, but it can record different, which we'll be seeing shortly. And then you can even track, because everything goes was with a date and time stamp. And when you do a transaction, it is up to you, or it is up to the users, or it is up to the designers of the system, how much information you want to attach to each transaction. That itself makes it very useful. So all relevant information for every transaction is uh, uh, attached to it. Even maybe in the case of your contact, one of the applications is in voting. one of, uh, and that is an offshoot of the fact that blockchain can also be used for identity management, just like you have Aadhaar. Okay, so even your fingerprint could become one of the parts of a transaction. So if a blockchain is maintaining your records, your photo, your fingerprint, along with the same data for so many others who are in that blockchain, that can be stored in a block. Okay, and we'll be seeing some more details how it happens, and what kind of effort is involved in all that. An asset, now asset can be either tangible or it can be intangible. Tangible means which has physical form. You can touch it, you can feel it. Okay, so a asset, a tangible asset like a house, a car, a cash, a property, these are all things whose records can be stored in a blockchain. You can even store records of intangible assets like intellectual property, patents, copyrights, even branding. Today, there are companies who have made their brands and everything associated, maybe the logo, the tagline, all of this can be put together in blockchain. And now, if anybody tries to copy that, you have proof that this is something which belongs to you. Okay, so that is where blockchain can be used for tangible as well as intangible assets. And besides branding, there is something called NFT, which you might be hearing a lot these days. NFT stands for non-fungible tokens, and we'll be spending 2 minutes looking at the details of NFT also. Okay, so virtually anything of value can be tracked and traded on a blockchain network. And because of the design of the blockchain, it reduces risks. And actually, in blockchain, there are no commissions that, at least in Bitcoin, so, or in terms of any cryptocurrency, there are no commissions that you have to pay to anyone for doing a financial transaction. Okay, so it's able to cut costs. And even in any other kind of assets, you can call them digital assets, but any kind of assets, right? Any kind of assets whose record is being maintained, even if you have to pay something, the cost of doing the same thing in other ways is more than doing it on blockchain. Okay, that's why blockchain has actually become so attractive to companies. All right, so we go ahead and to be able to create a blockchain. Okay, just like we looked at cloud, in cloud you had infrastructure as a service, you had platform as a service where developers could come and develop their application. They don't have to keep the tools of development. So if you want to develop a mobile phone application, you don't need to keep the Android software development kit with you. Okay, it will be available if you subscribe to platform as a service with any one of the service providers, right? So for blockchain also, there are platforms. Now these platforms, until recently, maybe 5-7 years back, until that time, you needed to have that software, and you needed to have people who will set up the blockchain with all the kind of features that you want. So for this, you need a blockchain platform. So blockchain platform allows the development of blockchain based applications. And as we mentioned earlier, these blockchains can be permission or permissionless. Ethereum, Hyperledger, R3, Ripple, these are all names of different blockchains. Okay, or you can say tools from which blockchain can be made. Okay, which allow people to develop and host applications on the blockchain. Blockchain is itself an application. To be able to access blockchain, again, you may need some more applications. So there is a lot of software, around the blockchain, right? And blockchain itself is actually in a software form, which actually gets distributed over different computers across the world. These computers where a copy of the ledger is maintained are called nodes. That is something which you can keep in mind, right? And all users need not be nodes, right? But there will be many nodes, and that is the way the blockchain technology is designed, that they keep plenty of nodes. In fact, they recommend, they kind of incentivize that you should maintain a node. Then every such node will be having a copy, and that makes it difficult to tamper. Okay, now in a permissionless blockchain, which I mentioned, like Bitcoin, anyone can join, read, write, or even audit the transactions without the need to ask for anyone's permission. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Dash, and Monero fall under this category. These are all cryptocurrency platforms using blockchain. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, these are all cryptocurrency platforms based on blockchain. And because it is necessarily, going to be used by general public, it has to be permissionless. Of course, you can make it permission. Then you'll have to give them an app, and that app will have a username and password. So as I mentioned, in the early days, the blockchain was permissionless, but now most of the blockchain developers, users, right? The blockchain platforms or the blockchain applications which are developed, they are all permission these days. Okay, but you should know what is a permissionless. I think even today Bitcoin remains a permissionless platform. Okay, then you have permissioned blockchains, and this is the large number of blockchain applications and developers create permission blockchains, and they can be on private networks. Say for example, a consortium of banks, they're actually using it today for interbank transfer of money, because their general public is not involved. They're actually using it. And these are all permission blockchains. So if there are 20 banks who are part of that consortium, each of them will have a node, each of them will have an entire copy of the blockchain, and each of them will have access permissions to access the data on the ledger or on the blockchain. And they can be accessed only by authorized users. Hyperledger, Quorum, Corda are platforms that fall in this category, which means if you want to develop permission-less blockchain, you can use these platforms. Okay, if you want to develop permission blockchain, you can use these platforms. So this is about platforms. This you can look at this at ease, at convenience later on. As you see, you can see here the main part is Ethereum is also permissionless. Besides Bitcoin is not mentioned here. Ethereum is permissionless, but all other platforms you can see are permission. Okay, that's very important. And then you can also see that many of them have what is called smart contract, which is again something we'll be spending 2-3 minutes understanding. And there is also something called a consensus algorithm, which are again different types of algorithms are available. See, we will be talking only about of the high level concepts in blockchain. So you also don't worry about all these names. You just understand there is something called a consensus algorithm. It is required to pass this test before a block can be added. And we'll see that a little more in detail on a different slide. But these are platforms. And this mainly I added this table to show you that only one or two are permissionless. Most of the others are permission. Okay. And in case tomorrow you happen to be going to create or use a blockchain, then you should keep this checklist in mind. So you have to understand whether your blockchain is centralized or decentralized. See, blockchain can be centralized, but it is preferred that it remains decentralized, because they don't want a controlling authority. But like bank consortium and things like that, they may keep it centralized, but the most favored one is decentralized. Then you have to see what kind of consensus mechanism it is using, and what is the cost, how long has it been in use, that is maturity. Does it support smart contracts? So we'll come to that. Is this in the public or private domain? So essentially this means whether it is permission or permissionless. You have to study it from these factors. That is why this slide is given. What are the development tools that are being used to develop this blockchain, and what is the feedback with regard to the performance in terms of the speed? That means when you do a transaction today, if you want to earn bitcoins, okay, then a block gets added only once in 10 minutes. In less than 10 minutes you cannot add a block. So if you're a bitcoin miner, you have to keep this in mind. But that is only for cryptocurrency. When you're talking of other industrial applications, commercial application, you still have to see how long a time it takes before a transaction becomes a block or before a group of transactions become a block. In a block you can have one or you can have multiple transactions. Most often there are many transactions in a block to make the whole operation cost effective. Okay, so these are some fundamental points about blockchain platform which I wanted to bring to your notice. As I said, some of these things you may not get a full grip immediately. Don't worry, just understand these concepts and keep these names in your mind, these words in your mind. They will help you when you are subsequently looking or reading anything about blockchain. Okay, so we said that a blockchain is made up of blocks. This is what this is a virtual, this is just giving you a visual idea about what is a block. The simplest components, there are many things inside the block, but they all fall into one of these three categories. And that's why it is said that the basic components or the parts of a block are these three. So one, there is the data which the block is going to store, which is essentially different transactions or records that you want to store in this. That is your data. Okay, sometimes you may even have extra programs which are supposed to get automatically triggered. That's where smart contracts come into picture. But all of this are clubbed under data. Then you have a block hash. A block hash is the unique identity of each block in a blockchain, and therefore a block should have a hash, and there is a way to find that hash. Again, those are technical things. What you have to remember is there is data, there is a identity for the block, which is the block hash, and this block will also store the hash of the previous block. So in blockchain, what is happening? Blocks are getting added chronologically. So there is always a block earlier. So you can have a question. So what happens to the first block? Okay. The first block is called the genesis block, right? And that is designed in such a way that it doesn't need the address of the previous block. That's all. Okay. So there is a first block that is specifically called a genesis block. Okay, but after that every block will have these three components, and that is something which you should have very clear in your mind. And we go a little deeper into understanding how information is actually arranged in a chain of three blocks. This is a blockchain comprising of three blocks, and you can go on adding blocks here. Okay, so as we said, this is the data. Okay, and this is the hash. This hash is the fingerprint of this particular block 1. But let's take a block like block 2, because this is the genesis block. That's why in the previous the hash is 00000 only. This is the first block. This is what is called as the genesis block, right? But if you look at a block in the middle, the second or the third one, then you will see one, it has a hash of its own. This hash for you is nothing but a string of it's alphanumeric string. It can be some alphabets, it can be some numbers. Okay, that is a hash. There is a hash function, and that hash function, you have to give it some input and it will generate this hash. And that input actually is this data. First you collect all the data that you want, okay, and then you give it to the hash function. The hash function will create a hash. That will be a string of numbers. Okay, and it can be 128 bits, it can be 256, it can be even more. The most widely used is a 256 bit hash. So these are the three components which are basic. Okay, then there is something called nonce. It's shown in yellow. We'll come to this later on. This is just a way for us to identify that this block 1, this block 2. Actually inside the block, it might be keeping somewhere the track of number of blocks in it, but essentially this 1, 2 and 3, these are the main components that you have to always look at. This is what you will get to look at also if you are able to view the blocks in the blockchain. So this is what makes up the blockchain. Okay, so let us go forward and look at how is a block created and how is it added. Okay, and this is the core of understanding blockchain. So just pay attention. I am trying to put it in as simple words as possible. There are many technical things that happen in every step. You don't have to worry about that. So we look at the sequence of steps and the basic things which are of commercial importance. Okay, so in a commercial importance, we want to store transactions. Okay, let's say banking transactions. Okay, or let us say we want to store data about it's like a pharmaceutical company now that is making different kinds of medicines. Take one particular medicine, okay, and then let's say it is being sold in tablet form. So the tablet comes on strips, and if you see on each strips, right, lot of information is there, and something which is vital besides the name, the ingredients, the name of the company, you will have the batch number. Okay, that batch number is very very important. If something wrong happens with a patient, and if you want to check whether there was some contamination in the medicine, you need that batch number, right? So that is so if this is a blockchain which is storing information about a particular specific product of a pharmaceutical company who wants to use, who is actually using the blockchain to track, how much was produced, where it was distributed, all those things also come in that transaction. You can store who are your main, which are the main dealers to whom it went, which batches went to which dealer, dealer sent it to which retailer sold it to which hospital or patient. This entire amount of data can be stored, sometimes in one block, sometimes in more than one block, because things happen over time. Okay, so when it is manufactured, it is inside the company, and the company will have ready certain part of that data. So with that, a block can be made. And then it goes ahead and adds more block by adding more information. Okay. Now, so you have these transactions, these or a set of information. This information is collected, and sometimes you may collect information running into thousands, but there is a limit on the amount, the size of each block. So based on that, we don't have to worry about that. It varies from something like 2 MB to 8 MB, but you don't worry about that. You just worry that there is a fixed number of transactions that a block can handle. Once these number of transactions are ready, then the process of creating the block starts. So first thing is you create that hash. Now, let's say all transactions to be stored in the block, they are ready. So from that you create a hash. Okay. And then there are other steps that happen. Now after that, actually different things happen. This block may be sent to all the nodes, okay, to check. Then the nodes will check whether this information, the transactions that have come, right, are okay or not. Is there any error in that? But more important, this is actually going to the miners. Here it is actually going to the miners, because the miners have to do something on each new block to actually arrive at what is called this nonce. What is the nonce? We will see later. You take it, it's a number. Okay. And they have to arrive at this nonce, which they do by an iterative process. Okay. So they will start with some number as a nonce. So if it is a existing blockchain, some numbers are already used up. So they will see that they don't take any of those numbers, they'll take any other number. And then they have to start, they have to actually create a new hash. So based on this data, you create the hash of the block. Now this block plus an assumed number, it is just like playing that some kind of magic game. Okay, guess a number. Then and then you will say, is it between this and this? Exactly something similar is what happens in trying to identify a particular nonce, because the design of blockchain is such that for every block to be added, a target hash is given to the miners. Sorry, just a moment. Okay. So a target hash is given to the miners, and now that hash has to come out of the fingerprint of the block, and then this guess number. So what they do is, this is already fixed. Once you have all the data, this hash gets generated. Now they create a new hash using these two items of information, the nonce and this hash, and you'll get a new hash. And then you have to match whether this new hash matches with the target hash. If it matches, then you have been successful. Okay. Now this kind of work is done by many people with nodes, and these people are called miners. And this goes so far today. Now just to give you why all these steps are involved and where it plays a role is, in bitcoins the same process is used. When you do this successfully, in the very beginning, people used to get, I think, 50 bitcoins. The moment one block, they could guess the correct nonce value, right? The correct nonce value, then they would get 50 blocks. What Satoshi actually recommended in that time itself, that after every so many years, I think it is 20 years or 40 years, some period is there, then you will get only half of that. So it became 25 after some years. Maybe it is 10 years or 20 years, because 2008 and we are just on 2013. So it's even less than 10 years, maybe 4 years, 6 years, something like that. That data is available if you search. The point is, the amount of bitcoins that a miner will get will go on reducing. Okay, so at one stage it will become near zero. So that also is possible. So but don't worry about that. This is the process that you have to understand. So this hash is created from this data, this hash plus a guess. So this, they start by guessing this number, they create a new hash, they have to compare it with the target hash. If it matches, and whoever, because multiple people are doing the same task for a particular block, and that is why in this step, that block has to be distributed to all the people who have nodes, all those people who have nodes and are interested in earning bitcoins, right, or in earning some other kind of compensation. They will do this job, and this job in Bitcoin, it takes at least 10 minutes. It can take a little more, but today it takes about 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the core task that is involved in what is called mining. Okay, and once you get this, um, uh, guess the correct nonce, which creates the target hash, the block is now ready for further checking. Okay, and then it goes to again another, again within the nodes there could be some people who are miners, there could be some people who are validators. Okay, and there could be some people who are doing both. Okay, but once that block target hash is known or obtained, then it goes to the validators. Okay, and the validators will check everything once more. After that, there is a consensus. That is not shown as a separate block here. Right? After that, there is a consensus, and the node which has actually solved that problem first, they will get some reward. Okay, but there is a consensus. So after validation, again it is distributed to everyone who has the ledger, and they can check and see if there is anything, any discrepancy is there, and they do a voting. So they will give a feedback saying, yeah, this is okay. Once this feedback crosses 51%, only then this block gets added to the chain. Okay, so this whole set of steps is also something that makes it difficult for hackers. Still, there is a problem called the 51% hacker problem, but we won't get into that. So there is still a small possibility, but for that to occur, the probability is very, very low. And that's why, as on date, compared to other technologies, blockchain is considered very, very safe and secure, even from hacking. Okay, in the early days, right, because the software for blockchain itself, the code written for blockchain was not strong enough, hackers actually hacked the blockchain. That story we'll see when we are looking at bitcoins. But now the technology has matured and has been so well designed that we haven't heard in the last 2 or 3 years any blockchain getting hacked. Okay, so that is where we are today, and these are the reasons why blockchain is gaining popularity, or are being is being favored by even different commercial businesses. Okay, so this is how a block is created. So now you will understand that to be able to work a blockchain, for a blockchain system to exist, there are many things that are required. These are the in the system. Okay, the components of the block is different. These are the components of the entire blockchain system. So you need somebody who understands cryptography, right? Because hash and everything is related to cryptography. Okay, you need a peer-to-peer network. Peer-to-peer network is all these nodes. There is no central server. Okay, like in a client server setup, you have clients and you have a server. The server is replying to all the clients, and all the data and main application remains in the server. Here it is not like that. It is a P2P network. So every node is equivalent to a server. Okay, and every node has a copy of that database. It's not like the database is in one place. So the ledger is stored in every node, and that is why they call it a P2P network. Okay, and then it goes through these processes called mining and consensus mechanism and validation. Okay, so those are the processes involved in mining the block. That's why they say it is called mining a block. It's nothing but doing everything in a specific order and getting it checked and validated, and then an agreement from all, at least 51% of the members of that blockchain, that yes, this block is fine, it can be added. And when it gets added, that is it gets added to this ledger. So these are the components of the entire blockchain system. Okay, so now we move on to quickly seeing some of the concepts related to blockchain, because to if you I think you should take interest in understanding blockchain. Maybe over the next 2-3 years, you will interface with blockchain somewhere. You're most likely to be handling or buying some kind of cryptocurrency, simply because if you have been reading the news, yesterday there was a meeting of heads of government or the finance ministry with the prime minister. Any of you have read this news item? Murthy sir has read, I know. So I think you are not ready. You should go back and check today's newspaper. It has something that what the government is thinking about cryptocurrency. So far, very, very few countries are allowing use of cryptocurrency. Even US is not allowing it. China has banned it. India is still it's not legal in India. Okay. But they all agree, if not today, tomorrow, we will have to think seriously about cryptocurrency. It's only this governing part, how to make sure that nothing goes wrong. That is because that is the reason why they're not legalizing it. And even this committee has agreed, you cannot wish away cryptocurrency. Okay, blockchain is accepted, blockchain is legal, but blockchain cannot be used for cryptocurrency by any company in India, and you cannot exchange rupees for cryptocurrency officially in any through any means in India, because it is not legal. Okay, but it is going to come. So when you reach that stage, if it helps if you know some of these words and what they mean and what happens. Okay, so that is why I have devoted some time to this. The first part is the PKI. PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure. Okay, so to even understand Bitcoin, actually you need to understand the principle of public key infrastructure. Okay, essentially it means that each user that wishes to communicate with another user has two keys, one which is the public key and one which is the private key. Okay, the private key is always with the owner of the data. Whoever, so if my data is going to be on a blockchain, that part I will have the private key. Okay, but there are many other situations which are simpler to understand. So let us look at this example. As I said, even the simple username and password can become two keys. Okay, you put some alphanumeric strings, no, as username as well as password, correct? In the case of a public key or a private key, there they can be in the form of certificates, which could be physical also, but mostly they are in soft copy form. That is again nothing but a string of numbers and alphabets. So this public key or private key both are a string of alphanumerals. Okay, it is which key is private and which key is public, because what a private key can do, a public key cannot do. That is the main purpose of having two keys. And if you look at this example, it will give you some idea where it helps. Okay, so assume that Arun wants to send a letter to Piyush. Okay, now Arun would need the public key of Piyush, so that is one way. He will use this key to encrypt the letter and send it to Piyush. So what has he done? Arun has the public key of Piyush, and he is using this key to encrypt a letter or some text which he wants to send to Piyush. Piyush would then use his private key to decrypt the letter which has come from Arun. Okay, so that is one way it could be set up. Another way is Piyush can use his if Piyush has Arun's public key. Okay, then Arun could have encrypted it using his private key. So uh, both the keys can, the public key normally is used for decryption. It is normally used for seeing the data. To create that encrypted form, you need a private key, and that's why the private key is normally with the owner of the data that is being handled. Okay, but you are just understand there are two keys. One is called public key, one is called private key. Public key is the one that usually gets distributed to general public. Now that distribution until recently was very freely done. You just send it by email because it is a string of alphanumeric string. It's an alphanumeric string. You can even send it by email, you can even print it on a paper and send it, but then the person will have to type everything again, which, and you can easily end up making a mistake because there are 128 or 256 such alphanumeric alphabets in that. Okay, so uh, there are two keys, and this is the way they operate. Okay, so we move on to the next concept. That is about hash. So as I said, every block in a blockchain has its own hash, which is like the fingerprint of that block. Just like for us, our fingerprint is our identity, right? And it is unique. No two people are supposed to have the same pattern in as their fingerprint, and that is why it is being used in your biometrics. An equivalent is this one, which is used in the blockchain. So every block has to have its own hash. I told you how that hash is created is you feed all the data to the function. There is a function which creates this hash. Okay, so a hash is generated by applying a hashing algorithm, which you can look at it as a function to a data item. So you give all the data to that algorithm or function, and it will create this hash. This is a hash created an algorithm which is called SHA-256. Again, these are technical things, you don't have to worry about it. But you have already used this kind of encryption decryption system, because today when you go to any website, okay, when you go to any website, the website always has to be now HTTPS. You might have found that Google does not open certain kind of websites. Have you had that experience? When you try to visit some sites, no, Google will not open that site. It will say it is insecure. Have you had this experience? When you're doing even Google search, you will get a list of 20 30 on your first page. Just try opening all of them. Somewhere it will not open that site only. That is because now this websites are also using this concept of hash, or this public key private key. So the main server where the website is located will have a private key with which it will encrypt, and a public key has to be sent to any person or that browser which is trying to take content from your website. Do you understand this? So then the concept of PKI will become even easier to understand. So when you send a request to ICICI Bank, right, that I want to log in, then what happens is it is always HTTPS. You can check this. All sites, 99% today, you cannot open a site using Google Chrome if it is not HTTPS. Okay. So when you go there, that site there is a separate mechanism. That site will first, ask for your public key, and that key will be sent to a certifying authority. That certifying authority will tell ICICI Bank that yes, this is a genuine customer and you can trust it. That is depending on the public key which your browser is sending. Then it will use ICICI Bank will use its private key to encrypt the information that has to come to you. Even the login page, okay, it will come to you, but it will come with a private with a public key, and that public key may come separately. This can be even preloaded into some machines. Okay, so with that public key, any user of that website can decrypt the data that has come. So public and private key can work both ways. It depends on how the encryption has been done. Okay, you will always get the public key, and you can use that to open the document. But encryption, you need the private key. So ICICI Bank will encrypt a page, send it to you with a public key. The key may come separately also. The key may be preloaded also. When you download an app in your mobile, the public key is normally already linked to that app. Okay, so it's very easy to open the site on a mobile phone, right? That is where this PKI infrastructure actually, no, public private key infrastructure is actually getting put to use. That same technique in a different way is used in a blockchain. There is a hash function. Here, instead of public key, private key, this hash is generated. This hash is unique, and that is the identity of each block. So that is the meaning of hash. Now we saw already what is mining. So the process of adding a new block to a blockchain is called mining. Blockchain mining involves adding transactions to an existing blockchain distributed among all users of a blockchain. Mining involves creating a hash of a block of transactions. Okay, and because of that, it cannot be easily tampered, right? And it also cannot be forged. Okay, because that fingerprint is only pertaining to that block, and it protects the integrity of the entire blockchain, because every block will have its own independent fingerprint. Okay, and that is why you don't need a central system to validate that all blocks in the system belong to genuine or has genuine information and belong to genuine people. Okay, so a block contains more than 500 transactions on an average. Now this depends on the design of the blockchain, but Currently, they say that a block, they design it with about 500 transactions that can be stored in one block. So the average size of the block, okay, I was thinking it is 2 MB, is 1 MB, right? And in Bitcoin, the size of a block can go up to 8 MB. So you can almost go up to 8 times, which will be 4,000 transactions also can be stored in one block. But as I said, this is completely dependent on the design of the blockchain, and the software will control this. Today, these are the kind of limits that are being used. But what you have to understand is one block can contain multiple transactions. That is the first and very important thing. These transactions are used to create the hash. The first, the hash of the block. Okay, and then you see this nonce. Actually, nonce is an abbreviation for a number only used once. So as I said, once a number was guessed and used, you will not be able to use, I mean, you if you use it again, you will not get the target hash, right? So because in mining, the objective is to be able to identify to identify a nonce which will give you a target hash, and the target hash is decided by the complete design of the blockchain itself. The blockchain network also actually it takes into consideration how many nodes are there, and because and when the nodes increase, and the design of the blockchain is such that with every new block getting added, with every new user becoming a node, the complexity of the target hash keeps on increasing, and that's why the time to mine a block will go on increasing. And unfortunately, the amount of money or incentive that you get there, it is designed so that it will go on reducing. So these are some properties, the way in which blockchain is working, but those things can be modified for commercial applications. But in Bitcoin, there is a limit up to which you will be able to mine the Bitcoin. That's what they say. Okay, but here what you understand is nonce. So nonce is, besides all these components, again, don't worry too much about the actual name, right? There is something called Merkle root and all that. Don't worry about that. Here it is just saying what is the version of the software that is being used. This is the hash of the previous block, and rest you just take it as time-stamped transactions. Okay, and using this timestamp transactions, you will first generate a hash of this block. Okay, and that hash of this block with a guessed value of nonce is used to create a new hash, and you have to do this iteratively till this new hash is the same as the target hash. Every time a block is ready for adding, the blockchain system will provide you a new target hash. That is how this whole system works, right? So how to find the nonce? A miner must guess a nonce, append it to the hash of the current header, rehash the value, that means find a new hash, and compare this to the target hash. If the resulting hash value meets the requirement, that means if it is equal to the target hash, the miner has created a solution and is awarded the block, for which actually in Bitcoin you get Bitcoins. Okay, so that is how this whole Bitcoin mining works. That this is the role of a nonce. A nonce is a guessed value. That's all. Okay, and it will be used only once. That's why it is called nonce. So besides that, we saw that there will be people who will validate that the sequence of operations followed by the miners is proper or not. They will check all the timestamps. What did you do when did the last transaction come in? When did you do hashing? When did you do the second level of hashing? All those things are checked, and then it gets validated. So that is what validators do, and that's what happens in the process of validation. So a block validator is someone who is responsible for verifying transactions within a blockchain. Any participant can be a blockchain validator by running a full node. Okay, now the reason why everybody doesn't run a full node is something that will come shortly. So a validator has to run a full node. Unfortunately, since running a full node incurs a cost, and I'll spend 2 minutes just to give you an idea of what happens. Because the degree of difficulty, the target hash is becoming more and more difficult to guess the nonce, right? The computing power required is going up, and when the computing power required goes up, earlier what used to be done by one person slowly became a group of people. So you had pools. So in 2000, say 8 9, there were individual miners, and they used to mine, and they used to easily get the target hash, and they used to get bitcoins. Now as more and more people started joining and the task began to get difficult, so people grouped together, and they all started saying, okay, let us group our resources. So they will put all their computers together, and they will put it for searching these nonce, and thereby share the cost of the power, because now you need more machines. And actually instead of CPUs, they now started using GPUs, because they found that the graphical processing units can do this work faster. And it's a race, whoever gets that nonce first, the correct nonce first, only that person will be awarded, even though work is done by so many people. So that is one part which you have to understand if you want to become a miner. That itself is a big business. So much so that the machines are now, there are miners who have their own data center running maybe 30, 40, 50 machines, right? And they are high-end computing machines. And still they say they are able to make a profit. The last video I saw, they said that they can make a profit up to 75%. Because again, that is because the value of Bitcoin itself has shot up, which again we'll be seeing in the next session. Okay, so validation happens, and it's important to note that validation and consensus are not the same thing, but I think it's not critical for you, right? However, uh, consensus involves determining the order of events in the blockchain and coming to an agreement that everything has been done in the right sequence. And after that, they will do a voting, and the voting should have a majority. So when that number of votes, agreements are more than 51% of the nodes, or cross 51% of the number of nodes, this block is ready for action. So that is how validation and consensus happens. So just note here that so validation and consensus are two different things, but I think you don't have to worry about that. Just remember that validation precedes consensus. So first everything has to be checked, and you make sure that yes, the blocks have been made properly. And then essentially consensus involves agreeing on the order of events of the validated transaction. A block is added only after at least 51% of the nodes agree. Okay, and keep in mind that validation precedes consensus. Okay, to do this consensus also, there are algorithms and software functions which have to be run. Okay, and it can be run in any one or more of these ways. Again, this is just a list for you to know words like what is, there is something called proof of work, or it may be a proof of stake, or delegated proof of stake. There are different consensus mechanisms. So like when we do voting, earlier you have to go to a polling booth, and you have to go and stamp on a piece of paper, then fold the paper and put it in the box, right? Afterwards you had electronic, so you only go and press a button. Like that, in this also, the consensus mechanism also, just these are all steps taken to ensure tamper proof creation of blocks and security, that it cannot be hacked. Okay, so these are different algorithms or mechanisms by which consensus can be reached. That's all you need to understand. I put this slide for you to just know what are those different mechanisms. So when you read proof of work, at least you can connect. Okay, that is one kind of a consensus mechanism. Okay, then you have another new feature which was not there in 2008, 2009, and in that timeline you can see somewhere in 2011, 12 or something, they added additional code into the content. So besides your transactions, they added additional code, and this code is something like an auto triggering application. So if you want, if you're staying in a rented house, okay, and if you want, and what you normally do, you want the rent to be paid on the 5th of every month to the person who has given that flat to you, is it not? And like this there are so many transactions. So suppose I have a subscription to Netflix, okay, and I know that I have to pay every 10th of the month, my subscription is due. Today also it happens through bank as an intermediary. Am I right?
Right.
Today it happens through a bank, right? you're paying your electricity bill or you're paying your phone bill, you can put auto instructions, no? So a smart contract is nothing but an auto instruction on a blockchain. Now here you don't have to pay any commission or charges for that. And because it also stores a lot of other information, they have brought this into blockchain also, right? The banks are still using it, but they have brought this feature into blockchain, and this will trigger release of, so it can even trigger, like, have you paid all the installments of your new house? Only then will a certain OC will be OC, or the sale deed will be made in your name. You got it? So you pay in installments to buy your house. Only when you paid the full installments, or if you put it in the blockchain, you can have this trigger automatically print the sale agreement and send it to you by email, because it is automatically paying to that builder. That whole system can be built into a blockchain. So then it becomes a smart contract. This is also important in many legal and other business contracts, because the validity is determined by the date. So once a date is crossed, that validity is null and void. But for us, the simpler cases are when we have regular payments to be done, and if you don't want to be bothered, and if that is to happen automatically, you can put it as a smart contract in an appropriate blockchain. I'm sure very soon you will be doing that, or maybe say if you're having a YouTube subscription, I don't know, maybe Google is already doing it, but with a slightly in a slightly different way. So it is still going through the bank. But if you have cryptocurrency, right? And let's say when cryptocurrency becomes legal in different countries, and let's say it becomes legal in India also, in with some rules and all that, you don't need to pay any commission to any bank. You buy, you keep some balance in your blockchain, and from that so many payments will happen automatically without you having to do anything, right? And no commission has to be paid on that. So smart contracts are simply programs stored on a blockchain that are triggered when predetermined conditions are met. Okay, a network of computers executes the actions when predetermined conditions have been met and verified. Now these actions could include things like releasing funds to appropriate parties. As I said, if you have bought a flat, you want to release funds. Even registering a vehicle, no, when you will get your vehicle will get a number only after you have paid insurance, only after you have paid fully to the agency selling you the vehicle. So many things, and it can be used in many things like this. Okay, so let me go down because I have to cover some more things. Then you have these NFTs. So
Sir,
NFTs,
sorry, they have a
sorry,
class at 12:50.
they
So
have a class at 12. Okay, I'll try to finish in another 10 minutes from now.
yeah,
Okay. So you have these non-fungible tokens, which is now becoming very, very popular, right? So tokens like cryptocurrency are cryptographically, so they will have that kind of hashing and things like that. So they are called secure digital assets. Though they are just tokens, they are secure digital assets because they represent something of value. Okay. Now tokens can be fungible. So when you say fungible, it is something like Bitcoin. So you can give a Bitcoin to somebody else, and it becomes that person's Bitcoin, right? But you can't do that with a painting. A painting created by a painter is the painter's painting. Okay, and today NFTs are used in for goods like this, as we will be seeing. Okay, so Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies are examples of fungible tokens. Now, unlike cryptocurrency, the newer tokens are now issued by even private companies. So you can have a blockchain where an artist can subscribe to that blockchain, and all his paintings can be recorded in that blockchain. And now, if a person X buys that painting, he will transfer ownership from his name to that person's name, and it is easy to check if somebody else has made a duplicate. Like Da Vinci's paintings or Michelangelo's paintings and all. So many duplicates are available. How do you know which? Sometimes it's so well made that you can't make out which one is the original and which one is the duplicate. Here, if you have what they do is they take the painting, right, add something more to that which is not known to everybody, and create a hash. And that hash is attached to the painting whenever it is sold to somebody. So the blockchain will keep a record of who is the new owner, and it has a new hash. Okay. Now, any other painting, if it is in the house of some person Y, that Y person has to prove that he is having the ownership. He can prove that only if he has that, if he is a member of that blockchain and has made the necessary changes, of ownership. So a painting can at any one time be owned only by one person. Correct. The rest will be all duplicates. So when you have to do those kind of transactions, non-fungible tokens become useful, and I'll just show you where they have been used. So NFTs can have only one owner at a time. That is one important thing you should keep in mind, because NFTs unique data makes it easy to verify the ownership and transfer tokens between owners. So when somebody else buys it, you transfer ownership. So if I am the painter, I will transfer ownership to the buyer, and the buyer can sell it to somebody, but at any one time there is only one original copy. Okay, and only one owner of that copy. So that is what NFTs are used for. And you will be surprised to know that in India, they have been around since 2014. In New Delhi, a blockchain powered platform is hosting an exhibition of 27 art pieces by a Bengali artist, LP Shaw. Okay, and now anybody who wants to buy can buy, and he will transfer the ownership. So this has been put to use. The most famous is Amitabh Bachchan. If you have seen, or you might have heard, he has actually recited the poems of his father. Right, his father had a collection of poems called Madhushala, and his recitation itself is very popular, and many people want to use it, want to listen to it in his voice. Now he has made an NFT. Okay, and he has also autographed so many posters and other collectibles, which totally amount to something like $1 million. That means already somebody has it's like an auction, and somebody has quoted, I'm willing to pay so much for this. The Madhushala recitations, that itself fetched 756,000 when the auction ended. This is how NFT is being used. Tomorrow it will be used even for songs, even for your videos, with some modification, but that is the scope. Okay, so I'm not going into advantages of blockchain. You can read, it's easy to understand. This is important, that blockchain service providers. Okay, and why I introduce these service providers is these are all people who are in cloud computing. Okay, so you will see that they all, and you see the names of the platforms. So they give you, they can do many things for you, for which you don't have to waste time. They can set up an entire blockchain, and from that checklist you can determine which platform you would like to use, and then you tell them what features you want, even what app you want to distribute to your clients. Everything they can do, and that's why you have what is called blockchain as a service, which we did not study when we were doing uh, this one, what your cloud computing. We introduced two new concepts, besides IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. We had CaaS, container as a service, and function as a service. Now you have one more, right? Blockchain as a service. So you should keep this in mind. Somewhere it will be useful. Okay. So these are the use cases. You can do all this. Is also you have to read only, and okay, these use cases are double, I think, maybe with some differences. But then you have to understand one last term called ICO. So this ICO is just like your IPO. So it is called an initial coin offering. Okay, and just like you apply for shares in an IPO, you can apply for coins, or you can apply, these coins could be something which you could sell in the market, or it could be showing what is your shareholding, or how much percentage of the company you own. Right, it's just like shares. Actually it works just like shares, except that this is again in a digital form. If you look at it that way, what is your demat? Your demat shares, do you ever see certificates today? You don't see the share certificate. Some of you people may not even have seen a share certificate, but I think Murthy sir would have seen physical share certificates, right? The moment we went to demat, there was nothing printed on paper. Now when you buy a Nika or a Paytm, there is nothing printed on paper. If you want, they will print and give. There is nothing printed on paper. It is all in a digital form in either NSDL, right? I think there are two exchanges,
CDS.
CDSL. So there are two demat repositories where in your name those shares are stored. So that is the closest. Now here the only difference between an ICO kind of thing is there is a centralized body. The CDSL and NSDL, they are two government bodies who are regulating and watching, monitoring, and keeping track of what is happening to the shares. If it goes into blockchain, then everybody who has that ledger will be able to see what is happening. And these are some of the issues that we are struggling with today. And once those proper rules are made, even ICOs, you should also know, very important, that you have heard of Telegram app, So the maker of Telegram raised $1.7 billion in 2018-19. But because it is not legal in the US, SEC filed an emergency action and obtained a temporary restraint order. Okay, it went on to become a big legal case, and the US District Court of Southern District of New York issued a preliminary injunction, and Telegram had to return 1.2 billion to investors and pay a civil penalty of 18.5 million. Now, this is all because the rules were not there, and they just went ahead and came out with this ICO for which people subscribed, they paid, but it was not legal, so they got into trouble. So this is the last slide, and this shows the top companies that are leveraging the use of blockchain technology. As I was saying, you can see there are companies in all domains: banking, finance, supply chain, healthcare, insurance. So that list you can see here. These are the companies in this domain who are actually using blockchain today, right? So these are the few points that I wanted to cover, and I hope it will give you a little more confidence in talking about blockchain and understanding blockchains. So that's about all that I wanted to say. Anything you want to ask in the next 5 minutes that you have? I know you have another session coming up.
Sir, I only have two doubts. You
Yes,
said
sir.
that these miners are the people who get the Bitcoin.
Yes,
So that means this is the something like a fees they get for creating a block.
correct, because they are using their computers and the power to run those computers,
Okay. So
and
miners are
also
the
the effort, the
uh,
the, the technical effort of modifying code or something. They do something else also, but essentially it is to invest in machines and power to run those machines.
but then as
Yes.
a user, do I have to pay any fees for putting this blockchain?
Yes, so if a banking consortium is running a blockchain, they will bear the cost. They will employ 2-3 people to do the mining.
Okay.
They will bear the cost. This is only for cryptocurrency. This was the incentive, no? That system was designed slightly differently. It was only for cryptocurrency, that you can mine and be paid in that cryptocurrency.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this cryptocurrency is available on a cryptocurrency exchange where they can sell and buy.
Yes, that we will come to when we are looking at cryptocurrency.
Okay.
Very soon, you might be even having ATM machines where you can put your, login and password, and it will give you the currency of the country.
I know. In fact, the first Latin American country, El Salvador,
Yes,
has made
they
this.
have started. They have just started.
They made it legal tender.
Yes,
They are
yes,
of course, very
yes.
poor country. I don't know how they have done it, but they have
So
done
they have their reasons. So that is why it's light understanding of all these technologies. And when you read those articles, you'll then be able to relate, why they did it.
it. Correct.
Right. So that is why I think good that we have these kind of topics. I hope the students have got a better grip than what they had till now.
They're
That
very
much
good.
I think I should have been able to achieve.
I know. Because it's a very,
But
very important emerging technology.
but if you read, if you just go through these slides again and again, and then if you do a Google search for anything that you don't understand here, I'm sure your foundation in blockchain technology will be much better as a user, not as a designer, not as a coder who writes the code that operates this technology. That is a different story altogether.
Yes. Any doubts? Anybody? Because you have to go. I have another class at 12:50. Anybody in the class? No doubts? I think
No,
they
sir,
are.
no, no
Yeah.
doubts.
I think they must have got overwhelmed by this lecture.
To some extent, I've tried to keep it
Yeah,
very
I know.
simple. But I'm sending you the presentation so you can again go over and then connect
Yes.
back to what we have discussed today.
Because one after the other, cloud computing, IoT, robotics,
But
AR,
see, yeah, I have not shown it here. IoT, I think, is also one of the applications. Because in IoT, lot of data is coming, and you have to validate it that this data is coming from the right source.
correct.
okay, and you want a timestamp that this happened at this time,
Correct.
then they are actually using blockchain
Oh,
to store this data.
very.
Okay, so IoT in IoT smart manufacturing and critical IoT applications, blockchain actually is used to store and make sure that the data is not tampered.
Right. So, right, sir. So,
Okay, sir, I'll sign off here, and we'll meet on Friday. That should be
right,
my last session on Bitcoins.
right, right.
Sorry, on cryptocurrency, specifically targeted at Bitcoins, but we'll be seeing the names of other cryptocurrencies also.
Yeah. And what I'll do is, earlier I was planning the test on Friday.
You may have to push it a little.
Next week I'll plan.
Sure.
And I'll wait for your input.
Yeah, I will provide you with that.
Right. Okay, sir.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.